need to
For the end?
What?
Okay, ready to start.
Bruchim Abayim b'Shem Hashem. Shem Yigin Shir Torah. We'd like to give a big Bruchim Abayim to everyone who came back for the new year of Purim. Hamachuna Tovshin Pei Gimel, even though it's still Elul, but it's Chelik of the new year. Today's shir is Nidvas for Moshe Klein, Leila Nishmas Oviv, Rabbi Sol, Moshe Menachem, Rabbi Shalom Yotziv of Elul, Teinish Moses, Tzir Tzarachayim. Today's shir from Rav Smith on the Inyan of early Shabbos. Rav Smith.
First of all, Shalom Aleichem. It's good to be back. It's always makes my landing in New York a little easier, knowing that I'm coming to see this wonderful Maimed. Be'emes, I always say the best shiurim are the ones that are real life shilas. And over the years, I've collected a number of shilas regarding the early Shabbos. We spoke about early Shabbos many years ago, but here are some questions that came up. Actually, someone had a child who made early Shabbos. He said Kabbalah Shabbos. Right before Married, we got a message from his family that the plumbing is not working. Come home right away and take care of it. And he asked me, what do you mean come home? I was mekabel Shabbos. Is there any way to bail out of Shabbos? Somehow reverse Kabbalah Shabbos? We had a shayla where someone had yartzeit on, this year was maes of, CHodesh was Friday, maes of a Shabbos. And he wanted to make early Shabbos. Someone told him, you can't do that. If you make early Shabbos, it's not the yartzeit. The yartzeit is maes. You're davening on Aleph. Varai, half of Klal Yisrael are still doing melacha. Another shaila, which is really very intriguing, is the problem of brachas. As we'll soon see, brachas is a chiyuv, some say deraisa, definitely the rabbanon. And as the Gemara says, menachos, Shabbos is always a problem because you're short brachas. If you make early Shabbos, so really, the brachas that you say, the Ma'ariv, the Kiddush, you're saying it on Friday. I mean, it's Shabbos, but it's Friday. So what's your location by an early Shabbos? And this and many more. So really what we have to do to resolve all of these questions is we have to really get a good understanding or a better understanding of what does it mean making an early Shabbos. It's easier said than done. But let me tell you, Yiddishkeit is all about zmanin. Too late is no good. Too early is no good. A person that decides to daven early Shachris, 3:30 in the morning, al zriza magdimin. So he has to pay the bill for 19 brachas levatala. No early Shachris. There's no late Shachris. Either you davened bisman or not. So how does the early Shabbos work? Now you want to make early Shabbos and don't do melacha as a buffer zone? Wonderful. But how do you daven Ma'ariv when it's still Friday? It's an hour and a half before Shkia. Half of Yidden are still doing melacha, will daven Mincha, and you're davening Ma'ariv and you're making Kiddush. How do you do that? But the truth is, it's not our invention. It's not an American invention. In Brachas Chav Zayin, the Gemara says, Rav davened early on Friday night. Shmuel davened early and made Kiddush on early Friday evening. And that's Gepaskin, the Reish Samach Zayin, Seed Beis. You're allowed to daven early Friday night and you're allowed to make Kiddush. If you're allowed to make Kiddush, you have to have a Suda. So obviously the early Shabbos is based on the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch. And Poik Chazim Ayam Debar. I must mention there are those that were skeptical. The Goyen was very against the early Shabbos. The Bach brings a Maral mi Prague that didn't like making an early Suda. So although there are those that are mafakpek, the brachas and Reish Ayim Beis, but basically the minig Yisrael is that to make early Shabbos, ve'einacha minig klum. But the question is, how does it work? Let's talk about a real summer day where Shkia is 8:30. So you daven Mincha early, you daven Ma'ariv early, it's still an hour before Shkia. Let's say a person had the following. He davened early Ma'ariv, and in the middle of the Suda, and he gets wonderful news that his son, his Einikel was born. It's 8:25, he's in Sumay Shel Shabbos, and he has an Einikel is born. When is that Einikel's bris? Let's say the whole city had made early Shabbos, and the baby was born. When is that baby's bris? No doubt about it, next Friday, because it's still Friday. So how does it work early Shabbos? So the emes, the pashtus, it is the Gemara Rosh Hashanah Daf Tes, where the Gemara is talking about Erev Yom Kippur. Based on a pasuk, there's an chiyuv deraisa of Tosefes Yom Kippurim that you have to add to Yom Kippur. Now, although that Gemara is talking about adding to Yom Kippur, but many Rishonim, and the El Yerabba puts it very bluntly, in Reish Samach Aleph, Sitkot and Yud Beis, Katsarti, I'm not going to get involved because it's Pashit, like most Rishonim and Poiskim, that Tosefes Shabbos is also a deraisa like Tosefes Yom Kippurim. So in other words, there's a chiyuv deraisa to add to our Shabbos. So I guess logic dictates that if you have to add to Shabbos, so it becomes Shabbos. You're not adding to Shabbos just for the fun of it, it's becoming Shabbos. So if it becomes Shabbos, how could you not daven and make Kiddush? But there is one more Kiddush before we apply this maes, and that's the Levush in Reish Samach Gimel Yud Zayin, that has just about a few words. And he says early Shabbos works als neder. You're allowed to add to early Shabbos like a neder. Now what does he mean? So I'll tell you, it's very poshut. A person could take a piece of kosher, glatt kosher meat, l'chol days is kosher. He makes a neder, and now the meat is asa. Why is het asa? That's the ability of a yid to turn het into issa. Levush has understood that early Shabbos is a form of a neder. You take Friday, which is mutter melacha, and turn it into Shabbos. And we'll soon see the many nafkaminas. But to make a long story short, we have the following conclusion. Early Shabbos is sanctioned from the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch. The simple understanding is that's the mitzvah of Tosefes Shabbos. It becomes Shabbos with all of its halachic ramifications. But it could be more to it. It could be a din of an ed. Now let's apply it lamaisa and shimu suchi nafsichem. Maes shahoya, a person, actually it was a woman that did not know anything about zmanim, and she tinded licht 6:15, way before even plaga mincha. The question is it a problem if it's too early? So the emes is the Zoya's Lashon, and of course translated Lashon HaKodesh, called ha-moisif, maisifin loy, and the Pri Megadim Reish and Vav says ha-moisif michayil ha-kodesh, maisifin loy chayim. So if early Shabbos works, what's wrong if it's a little too early? But then again, we have to understand, if you make early Shabbos at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's too early. Why is it too early? Because it has to have a shaychus to Shabbos. Plaga Mincha, we all know this, it's a Mishnah in Barakas, Daf Chavav. Plaga Mincha, according to Rabbi Yehuda, la'aloch la'maisa, if you daven Ma'ariv, always Mincha before Plag, and Ma'ariv after Plag, you yartzeit l'chatchila. You could do that your whole life, you have to be consistent. But after Plag is man Ma'ariv lahalacha. So it makes sense that if you mekabel Shabbos after Plag, it has a shaychus to Shabbos because it's man Ma'ariv. But who said before the Plag becomes Shabbos? It's just not Shabbos. But it could very well be that if you hold early Shabbos works als neder, neder is unlimited. Maybe you can make early Shabbos even 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Like you can take a piece of glatt kosher meat and make it asa. So maybe our shaila of the too early Shabbos is totally the two reasons. If it's a din of Shabbos, Tosefes Shabbos, so there's a reasonable cutoff point, plaga mincha. But if it's neder, maybe it works. Okay, I mean, you can't make Shabbos on Tuesday afternoon. Maybe it's totally in chatzos. But the emes is even more than that. Because if you daven Ma'ariv before the Plag, that's no good. That's partial. Because it's not zman Ma'ariv. If you light neiros too early, that's a Gemara in Masechta Shabbos, ubelvad shelo yagdim, too early, it's not nikitz to cover Shabbos. So regarding neiros and Ma'ariv, I can understand why Plag is a cutoff point. But regarding Shabbos, why can you make Shabbos before Plag? And the emes is from the Gemara Chav Zayin and Barakas that mentions early Shabbos. It doesn't say any limitation. It just says you're allowed to be magdam early. We have no raya one way or the other. But if you look in the Rabbeinu Yerucham, one of the Rishonim, Hilchas Yom Kippurim, Magen Avram and Reish Samach Aleph Sivkot and Yud quotes it, you're supposed to make early Shabbos. If you add extra, fine, but not before Plaga Mincha. Now, the emes is what I liked about this Rabbeinu Yerucham. He's not talking about davening Ma'ariv. He's not talking about lighting neiros. He's talking about early Shabbos as early Shabbos, and it does not work before Plag. In Reish Samach Gimel Siv Dalid, the Mechaba Paskins, you can't make early Shabbos before Plag. He quotes Toises, a Rosh, and a Mordechai. But if you look up the Toises, Rosh, and a Mordechai, the problem is because you can't have a Ma'ariv before Plag. Oh, that I understand. Because the earliest Ma'ariv is Plag. But Rabbeinu Yerucham is a good raya to our question. Because he's talking about making early Shabbos, forget about Ma'ariv. Before Plaga Mincha, Shabbos is not Chal. And the emes is, the Mishnah in two places, Reish Samach Aleph Chaf Hei and Reish Samach Gimel Yud Ches, says if you make early Shabbos before the Plag, it's like making early Shabbos on Tuesday and it's ineffective. In fact, Mishnah says if you sinned, the Isha sinned Lich before Plag, she was not yartzeit, and it's a bracha levatol. The Shvus Yakov in Chelik Beis Simin Vav is very critical of two early Shabbos before Plag, and an earlier source, the Oger, one of the Kadmoinim in Arvis Chav Zayin, he writes Kane Kinesi, and I'm going to get my Cher, my Chanis, I'm going to wage war against the Bnei Ashkenaz that make too early of a Shabbos. So we see two things. First, we see the prevalent minig was to make a very early Shabbos before the Plag, and Gedolei Achronim were out in a Melchemes Mitzvah to stop it. Now, of course, you could make early Shabbos and not do melacha. That's wonderful. It shouldn't come to Chilul Shabbos. But according to the Magen Avram, Rabbeinu Yerucham, Mishnah Berurah, Shvus Yaakov, Ogur, Levush, Reish Lamed Gimel Aleph, you're not yartzeit. The Shmir Shabbos in Mem Gimel Yud Beis spells it out. Even b'di'eved, the Isha herself could extinguish the neiros if she lit before Plag and wait for Plag and light again. It's not Chilul Shabbos because it's not Shabbos. And that's why, for those that make early Shabbos, it's a CHodesh to leave a chart for the women when is Plag for the entire summer if you're making early Shabbos. Because sometimes they like too early. Now, the truth is today is more of a problem. Because today many are medakdik to daven Mincha, Erev Shabbos, a lot before the Plag. Well, that's a different cheshbon, I'll start to the Sasri. But the husband goes to shul to daven Mincha, let's say at 6:30, when Plag is 7. So the Isha says, I don't know what time it is. I know one thing, when my husband goes to shul, it's late. So she lights. And rather, she's right, he is late. Because Mincha is 6:30 and he's leaving for a 6:30. But because he's late to a 6:30 Mincha, but it's still a half hour before Plag. So she lights after he goes to shul, and like the Mishnah Berurah, it's a bracha levatol, and it's not chal. So that's why, if you want to do early Shabbos, do it right. Leave the bnei bayis to zmanim for the entire summer. Plag is this, don't light before Plag. But, as I mentioned, it seemed to be prevalent in Ashkenaz that they made very early Shabbos. And as early as the Trumas Hadeshen in Chelik Aleph, Siman Aleph, Beroiv Kehilais, that they made a very early Shabbos, to the extent that the Trumas Hadeshen spells out that they daven Ma'ariv, ate the Suda, went for a walk in the Har Doni, and came back and it was still Yoim. So at first he says, well, how could you make it it's too early? But he says people did it, and it has to be allowed to make it even way before the Plag. And the Pnei Yeshua in the Lekutim, Masech the Brachas, in Seder, and the Maschul Bishosha Kehanim, after quoting the Shvus Yaakov that was against this minig, he justifies it based on the Trumas Hadeshen. What I found a real treat, the Toiras Shabbos in Reish Samach Aleph Sif Tes, he says, I don't understand. What's the problem with early Shabbos? If you daven Ma'ariv before Plag, it's not gedavened. There's no Ma'ariv before Plag. The earliest Ma'ariv is Plag, like Rabbi Huda says. But what's wrong with early Shabbos before Plag? And listen to his beautiful lashon. Since early Shabbos goes to Alt Neder, so why can you make a Neder before the Plag? Mali before, Mali after. So this is his take on it. There are Chashulchan and Reish Samach Gimel Yotes, in one of the few places that he quotes the Mishnah. He writes, some say if you light before plag you're not yartzeit, I am Mishnah udvar tmuim hem. Because the Kadmoinim made a very early Shabbos. So it's very problematic, this simple shaila. If a woman tzindit licht before plag, like the Mishnah it's not, you're not yartzeit and it's not Shabbos. Like the Chashulchan, who paskins like the Trumas Hadesh, and it is Shabbos. So I want to mention that Darkei Moshe in the beginning of Reish Samach Aleph quotes Rishonim that 2 hours before Shkia is also good. Not plag, 2 hours before. And he has a cheshbon, the ayin sham. But beyond that is problem. You know, imagine you get a phone call. Oh, you heard you learned Hilchas early Shabbos. My wife tzindit licht before plag and mincha. What should I do? So you'll say something like this. Light the Mishnah, she can blow it out and start again. Light the Chashulchan, it's Shabbos, mambers, don't touch it. A good in Shabbos, a good in Erev Shabbos, and have a nice day. That's basically what it is. You don't know what to tell this person. What's the location? What I found really beautiful, the Toras Chaim, Soif, Reish Samach Aleph, Yud Gimel, he makes a sort of a spalt. And he says, you can't make Shabbos before plag. There's no such thing. But als neder, it is chal. So you can't do melacha, but it's not Shabbos. That's how far they're using this key word of neder. So lemaisa, again, the best eitzah is that Bnei Abayi should know when plag is and not like before plag. If someone would ask me the shaila, I would say, keep the neiros burning. The woman should not do melacha, because light the Aruch HaShulchan all the way back to the Trumas Hadeshen, it's Shabbos. The man who didn't yet make Shabbos should light neiros, and if he lights in a different room, he probably can even make a bracha, because you can make it light in different rooms. And this way the wife has a backup neiros, just in case she wasn't yartzeit. Someone asked me, does she have a knas because she lit too early? Definitely not, because someone lit in her house. So that would be the eitzah. If Shkia came and then they realized the problem, then you could still call the guy could like neiros, and that certainly will be yartzeit, and there's no Samir La'akum, because it's a shvus to shvus, b'makay, it's a shvus actually, b'makay, bein hashmashos. Now, the real problem with the early Shabbos is for those that are very devoted to Rabbeinu Tam, who follow the zman of 72 minutes, even by the Rabbanans, even by a tainus, and Chassidim and some Bnei Yeshiva follow Rabbeinu Tam l'chol davar. So logistics is you have a problem because the plag, like Rabbeinu Tam, is kamat shkia. So to make an early Shabbos at 7 o'clock is too early. Now, why do you see some Chassidim or Bnei Yeshiva who keep Rabbeinu Tam making early Shabbos? Maybe they stay for Lazach on this Trumas Hadeshen, that there's no problem making too early. Or maybe for some reason when it comes to Erev Shabbos, early Shabbos, they rely on the other plag. But it's more likely that they either rely on the Trumas Hadeshen or Chashulchan, or they rely on the Darkei Moshe's 2 hours. Could be that's not totally in anything but the zman. We had a interesting ha'ara. Some yeshivas on a long Fridays, they don't want to have a long Friday afternoon of batala, so they daven mincha early, and then they have a seudah, a compulsory seudah limud. So this way the Friday afternoon is used well. So I pointed out to one yeshiva, they had a mincha, then they had a seudah, and then they made Kabbalah Shabbos. So I said it's better would be to make mincha, Kabbalah Shabbos, make it Shabbos, and then you'll have a seudah. What do you gain with that? You gain the Heilig Shabbos. You have an hour of learning with Kedusha Shabbos. Don't forget, the Ben Ish Chai in Shmois, Shana Beis, and Akdama writes, learning on Shabbos is 1,000 times more chashuv than learning during the week. So an hour is 1,000 hours. So they told me, yeah, but the problem is the Bachim like to write over the shir. Mekabel Shabbos, so you can't write. Okay, but I think it would be better to make out Mekabel Shabbos with Kabbalah Shabbos. Now one Bachim wanted to make daven Kabbalah Shabbos, but tonight there's not Mekabel Shabbos. I said, what are you doing? You're saying Tillim. Very nice, but there's no such thing. But anyhow, you have to have a little of a cheshbon to know what to do. My next question, a maes a number of years, a number of summers ago, now came, they talk to make early Shabbos, and someone came from a different colony. And in the middle of Kabbalah Shabbos, actually right after, during Mizmoy Shir, he got a message, there's something wrong with the plumbing in the bungalow, come home right away. So he looked at me, what should I do? I was mekabel Shabbos, I can't go do melacha. is it possible to undo or exit or hit the cancel button on the Shabbos? So if it's pikuach nefesh, you don't have to be mevatel the Shabbos, go. But we're talking about there was a problem with the plumbing, whatever, or electricity, whatever it is, and the wife needed him, and he wanted to undo the Shabbos. So the emes is, in Reish Samach Gimel Yudalid, there is a very interesting halacha, that it was a very cloudy, very rainy day, and they thought it was Laila, and the tziba was mekabel Shabbos, and then the sun started to shine. So the mekabel says this is what's called a Kabbalah Shabbos betois, and you're allowed to go back to Friday. You're allowed to do melacha. Now there's a lot of discussion if they daven Meir, if they tzinded licht, which is not negaya because we don't have this Kabbalah, this scenario we don't have, we have clocks. But there is a concept, trust me, of Kabbalah Shabbos betois. The question is, does that apply to our case that he's mekabel Shabbos and now his wife needs it? So the truth is that's not Kabbalah Shabbos betois. I'll give you an example of Kabbalah Shabbos betois. Someone who always davens Mincha Gedoyla Grada, and when it comes a few minutes before Shabbos, he's mekabel Itzumei Shel Yoim, because he wants to do it right. He wants to have Kabbalah Shabbos on Friday afternoon. The first Shabbos after they changed the clock, he was so programmed, so 6:30, okay, he's mekabel Itzumei Shel Yoim. He had a lot to do, but it's Shabbos, so he made Kabbalah Shabbos. But Dibur. Then he chap, wait a minute, they changed the clock, it's Shabbos is 7:35. He had an extra hour to do melacha. That's Kabbalah Shabbos betois. He didn't know time, he didn't know the zman. Or, let's say someone's clock was the wrong time and he's mekabel Shabbos. That's Kabbalah betois. But the question here is, when a person was mekabel Shabbos, but something came up, is that Kabbalah Shabbos betois? So let me tell you what I found about this question. A very common question for those that daven Mincha Gedoyla on early Friday afternoon. He is like a computer. Every Friday afternoon, 1:30, 1:40, he davens Mincha. Then it comes a few minutes before Shkia, and he's mekabel Shabbos biktushas. One Friday, for whatever reason, he forgot or couldn't daven Mincha Gedoyla. But he's so programmed that he already davened, so he's mekabel Shabbos 10 minutes before Shkia, and then he chaps Gewalt. I didn't daven Mincha yet. So what's his location? Shabbos. He can't daven Mincha of Chayil on Shabbos. So he can have two Meiros? He doesn't want to do that. Tashlumin. So the question is, can he make it Oy Shabbos because it was a tois? So again, this is not a Kabbalah Shabbos betois l'chayra. But, Shimu Suchi Nafshcha, listen to this. I found in the Oznid Bruchelik Al Siman Ayin Tes that someone always mekabel Teisef Shabbos regarding not do melacha, but not Shabbos, because he wanted to still daven Mincha. One Shabbos he slipped, and he said, mekabel Shabbos b'kedushasa. That's a Kabbalah Shabbos betois. But in our case, he was mekabel Shabbos. So the truth is, this sounds very similar to a Taz in Siman Tov Reish, Sif Cotton Bay, is a very famous Taz. The Taz, although is no longer negeya, but the Yisoid is negeya to all of us in many different scenarios. The maes was a city had a shofar that was stolen, and Laida the city had no shofar for Rosh Hashanah. Thursday went by, they had no shofar. Friday went by, there was no shofar, and it was a tragedy, a killer without a shofar. But the good news was, at least they're going to make early Shabbos and have a Shabbos shuva, an extra time. After they were mekabel Shabbos, they got a shofar. But it was still Vada Yom. Zok the Taz, that's Kabbalah Shabbos betois, and they get below shofar. Now this Taz is a Chiddush, but the Sholem Meshiv in Tinyana Beis Chav Gimel applies this to an Isha that was mekabel Shabbos, and then realized she didn't take off challah from her bread, from her dough. Or the Zera Emes in Gimel Chav Zayin, someone davened Mincha Friday on CHodesh, forgot to say Yalav Yavai, and remembered after he's mekabel Shabbos, early. So they all say it's Kabbalah Shabbos betois. Frag dechem et Moshe and Siman Tov Reish, Taz, what do you mean Kabbalah Shabbos betois? You knew the time, you knew that was going on, you forgot that you didn't know that you could have a shofar. That's not Kabbalah Shabbos b'tois. You wanted to make Shabbos, but you gotta found the shayfa afterwards. So we see our question, is a Kabbalah Shabbos b'tois, is a machloikis Taz and Chemet Moshe? The Aruch HaShulchan in Reish Samach Gimel Chav Daled also says you can't just undo a Shabbos. But here our question, can you undo a Shabbos or not? We have at least a Taz that says if you find out something, maybe that's Kabbalah Shabbos b'tois. But our question of this plumbing problem, there's no tois. Something happened. So the question is, maybe we're going to be a little aggressive and we'll say, you're right, it's not a Kabbalah Shabbos b'tois. But let me be shoyel my Kabbalah Shabbos. I'll get a bezdin, they'll say mutalach, 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 and I'll take off my big day Shabbos, put on my overalls, and I'll go fix the sink. Why not? But then again, mi samcha leish, who gave you the authority to make Shabbos into Friday? And the emes is, I could give you a whole list of poiskim, the Chemet Moshe that I mentioned, El Yerab Reish Samach Gimel Amud Ches, the Aruch HaShulchan Reish Samach Gimel Chav Ches, Rav Moshe and Gimel Amud Ches, all say, you can't undo a Shabbos. It's just not your Shabbos to undo. But Reiz Apella, Zot the Levush, in the same place, but in the Hagor, Reish Samach Gimel Yud Zayin, Lid Di, that early Shabbos works als Neder. Neder is a very chamotik isa, the raisa, but you could be mata neder. So Zot the Levush L'shitasi, if you make early Shabbos, you can be mata the Shabbos and go back to Friday. And the Taz and Reish Samach Gimel, the Pesachei Tshuva Isalin, all accept this as normative halacha, even if it's not Kabbalah b'tois. Now don't forget, Kabbalah b'tois, you don't have to be matir. It's just bottle. But this is a Shabbos, but you can be matir neder. What I found literally amazing, Rabbi Yosef Chaim, the Ben Ish Chai, in Torah Lishma, Siman Kuf Yud Zayin, has a very inspiring shayla grada, where someone hired to work on for him on Friday, and that Shabbos he went away for Shabbos. He went to a different city. After he davened Ma'ariv, early Ma'ariv, he realized, I didn't pay my work on time. I didn't pay him at all. To wait till Sunday, I'm going to be oivem b'yom titen schara. You know, you look in the Mishnah in Bava Metzia, it's a lav and asay, very scary. So he ran to the Ben Ish Chai, help, I want to pay the worker. So he says, could you contact someone in your city? No, they didn't have phones. So he goes, listen, how long will it take you to ride home to your hometown, pay the worker, and come back and start Shabbos again? Can you still do it? He goes, yeah, plenty of time. Do that. He took off his svardish shtreim or whatever he was wearing, put on his big day chayil, jumped on a horse, ran back to his hometown, paid the worker, and came back. And what did he do when he came back? He started again. Started Ma'ariv again. Zok the Ben Ish Chai, really, if you really want, you could falazach on the Taz that it's Kabbalah b'tois. After all, you didn't know that you didn't pay your worker. But if you don't want to be falazach on the Taz, be mata neder the Shabbos, go home, pay the work, and start again. Now, we clearly see from the Ben Ish Chai that you can be mata Shabbos even though you made Shabbos. But the pliya is, Rabbi Yid, what are you going to do with that Ma'ariv? Ma'ariv has 7 brachas Shemay Nesra, 4 brachas in Barakas Krishma. And if you count the Mein Sheva, it's another one. Now, there's no doubt about it, when you come back to your Shabbos city, you're going to have Ma'ariv again. What are you going to do with the first Shabbos? You know, today we have a computer, so you hit the cancel button and delete, and you're okay. But you can't delete 12 brachas. So I saw the Erech Shai in Reish Samach Zayin. He doesn't bring the Ben Ish Chai, he brings a levush that a Torah helps. And he says, a Torah only helps if you mekabel Shabbos b'dibur. Then you could exit Shabbos. But if you daven Ma'ariv, you can't turn brachas into levatola. And the truth is, this is not such a new problem. The Rishash in the Dorm Daf Nun Tes says if someone's mafresh truma, we know you're allowed to be shoyel nafrasha. Suck the Rishash, but if you're shoyel nafrasha, you're going to run into a problem of bracha levatola on the bracha that you made when you mafresh the truma. So I think, like this Rishash, there's no doubt about it, that to be matir the Shabbos, if you already daven ma'ariv, you're going to be left with a hefty bill of 11 or 12 brachas lebatol. But there is a chiddush of the Chassam Sofer in Yeredeya, Siman Shin Chav. The Chassam Sofer has a different scenario. And that is when someone is mafresh challah. I'll give you a very common example. Onisha took off the challah from the dough, and somehow, after she baked it, someone told her that the piece that she took off was put back into the dough. So now you have 5 pounds of baked challah, and part of it is the issa challah that you're not allowed to eat. That's a very chomodik issa. And you can't be bottle beroiv, you have to have 101. So now the whole dough is asa. So the halach in Shulchan Aruch is you're allowed to be shoyal the afrasha, and you're back to all tevel, and then start again. So Chassam Sofer, what do you mean? Reverse the hafrasha? It's a halbatzar. What about the bracha that she made? So Chassam Sofer, ein gan chash bracha levatol klal, ein beis meichash. Why? Because since you made the bracha b'tzivanu, at that time that was the Ratzon Hashem. But the same Ratzon Hashem is you're allowed to be mafresh on that, you're allowed to be shoyal on hafrasha. So the Chassam Sofer obviously is not concerned about the bracha of the afrasha. Now, can you say the same thing regarding the brachas of ma'ariv? That's so pashut. The Baruch said you have to take off challah. Now, if you have a problem, you could just be shoyal. But the ma'ariv is not part of my Shabbos. The ma'ariv is ma'ariv. So it's a tzorach in gadol if there's a problem of brachas of atol. Lamaisa, if someone was mekabel Shabbos, let's go in order, and only said Hareini mekabel Shabbos, or he daven Kabbalah Shabbos with mizmar shir, that's a Kabbalah bepeh, bedibur. But there's no bracha levatala. So I saw Rabbi Yashiv in the Shvus Yitzchak Chelik Ches Siman Yud Zayin. He has this shayla. Someone did not daven Mincha, but already daven Kabbalah Shabbos with mizmar shir. So now his location is Shabbos. What's it about the Mincha? So Rabbi Yashiv says it's a machloikis, levush, and others. If you could be shoyal on your Shabbos, but in this case, since you didn't daven Mincha, you could rely on the levush because you're not going to end up doing melacha. The worst is you can daven Mincha. No, you could halazach on the levush. So I saw that I was very happy. But what left me is our case where the person did say mizmar shir and wanted to go home and do melachos. Like Rabbi Yashiv, it doesn't work. You can't go do melacha if you mekabel Shabbos. But I do believe that like levush, obviously like the levush, usiyatoi, that you can be shoyal on the Shabbos, it even allows you to do melacha. Now, had he daven ma'ariv already, so then you're running into bracha levatol. That's the problem. But our question, he wants to go home and do melacha, but he already said Kabbalah Shabbos with mizmar shir, that is considered Shabbos. To do melacha is questionable. It'd be better if he goes home and calls and tells people to do melacha for him. That will soon see is okay. But for him to actually do melacha, it's best to avoid it, but I can't say it's wrong. Don't forget, the levush is matir. The Torah Lishma is matir even after ma'ariv. Kolsh came before ma'ariv. So if it's a question of shalom bayit, that's a pretty reasonable, important need, and there's what to be saimach on to actually do melacha. But now, what does that mean, mataneda? What do I do? So you got to do, like you said, mataneda. You have to get a bezdin of 3 who will hear your excuse, and shalom bayis is a good excuse, and they'll be mataneda. But the problem now is a matir nedarim b'Shabbos. So this is not a tzorech Shabbos. This is a tzorech your personal need. So indeed, I saw that the Paiskim, the Torah Lishma says, you have to get a bezdin of 3 that we're not in mekabel Shabbos. Because the Isser Ein Matir Nedarim is on the Matirim, not on the victim, not on the Shoyal. So get 3 people that were in mekabel Shabbos and be Mataned. The Imrei Bina in Shabbos Siman Yud, I forgot to mention, he also is very in favor of being Mataned Shabbos. He holds like the Levush Ezeraya, but he says since it's like Nidri Hegdish, you can only be Mataned with a Pesach. Charata will not work. So basically, you have a hetam of being matter the Shabbos. You go back to Friday. Best would be if you avoid melacha, but if he needs to do melacha, there's what to be saimach on. After you daven ma'ariv, you'll have to get someone else to tell you that it's mutter, because then you're turning ma'ariv into mamish brachas levatol. We had a following shaila. This mamish is past Shabbos. Friday was Rosh Chodesh. And the person forgot to say Ya'aleh v'yavai in Mincha. Typically, Mincha, you come running in, barely there, and you don't hear the clap. He finished Mincha. After Kabbalah Shabbos, he realized he didn't say Ya'aleh v'yavai. So, should he daven Ma'ariv and then make another Shemona Esrei? Or should he be shoyel and daven Mincha? So the time when you had last year when Rosh Chodesh was Friday, was a halbatzar, because if it's Friday and Shabbos, you're okay. But let's say you have when Rosh Chodesh is Thursday and Friday, so then Shabbos is always Rosh Chodesh. You can't even make the tashlumen on Shabbos, second Shemona Esrei, because you're not going to see Ya'aleh v'yavai anyhow. So because in both these cases, you could talk about matan neder, because you don't want to daven tashlumen Friday night. You want to daven zman. So if it only says mizmor shir, and you didn't yet do daven ma'ariv, and you want to daven mincha on Friday, so get a bezin of 3 to be mater, go back to daven mincha with Ya'aleh v'yavai, don't forget, and then you would have to say another mekabel Shabbos again and daven ma'ariv. But this year was different, because this year we had Shabbos was Shabbos and Sunday. I meant to say years ago when you had a Friday of Chodesh of, that was Friday. Okay, that's what I meant. Okay. So that's basically the yisoid, that there is a heta if you want to daven mincha to sort of reverse the Kabbalah Shabbos. I had a question which comes up often. Many people, they daven mincha early, mincha gedolah on Friday, early afternoon, and when they feel that they're ready for Shabbos, then mekabel kedusha Shabbos itzum shel yoyim. But some people have experienced that in my house there's always the last minute needs. And after mekabel Shabbos, we need something quick, do it. But I made Shabbos already. So he decided he's going to be mekabel Shabbos when he thinks everything is ready. Betnai. If no last minute things, I'm keeping this Kabbalah Shabbos. If something comes up the last minute, I want to go back to Friday. So the emes is that this probably works better than being matan neder. Matan neder, we saw as machlokes haposkim if it works on Shabbos. Levush is mata, others say there's no such thing. But making a tanai, I couldn't find anybody who speaks about it except for the Eretz Tzvi and Simon Samach. But l'chayr, a tanai is a very valid option. You mekabel Shabbos but tanai. Now, if you mekabel Shabbos tanai and daven ma'ariv, so you have a problem with bracha v'tol. But if you're just waiting a few minutes, see what happens, at least l'niyas daiti, you don't run into a risk. If something comes up and you want to exit Shabbos, you made it tonight. If someone knows anything different, please tell me. Question: Lo yalechem, an avel during Shiva, it comes Friday. He wants to make early Shabbos. Is there anything wrong with an avel making early Shabbos? So the truth is, if you make early Shabbos, he eliminates an hour or so of avelus, because there's no avelus after early Shabbos. But then again, it's a mitzvah to make early Shabbos. Why can he do it? He's mechuyev a mitzvahs. And a chanami, avelus is a great schus for the nifta. But then again, Shabbos is also a schus for the nifta, I imagine. Shabbos is Shabbos. So the truth is, it makes sense that there's nothing wrong. Just like at the end of Shabbos, we don't find avelim running to the first ma'ariv to exit Shabbos to start avelus, because Shabbos is Shabbos. Now, of course, you can't make too early of a Shabbos, but l'chayra, if the other wants to make early Shabbos in a reasonable time, you have to plan. L'chayra, what's the problem? So I looked into this, and the Salmas Chaim in Siman Reish Chav Zayin, the Chaim Zonenfeld, has a different shayla. We had it about this year, where Tisha B'Av was Matzoi Shabbos. So the old question, what do I do about Big Day Shabbos when I put on my slippers? So he says, as long as it's Shabbos, you can keep on Big Day Shabbos. And his raya is just like an ovel doesn't rush with the first man to exit Shabbos, because if it's Shabbos, there's no avelus. So Tisha B'Av also is the same thing. And there he says, and hu adin an ovel that makes early Shabbos, it becomes Shabbos. So at least we see Rabbi Yosef Chaim in the Samblas Chaim acknowledges that you're allowed to make an early Shabbos after Plag, of course, and then it becomes Shabbos, and Shabbos is no avelus. Okay, someone asked an interesting question. Maybe at home it's like Avelis Patzina, because no one knows he made early Shabbos. But I don't think that the Welt is chayshes for that. Basically, you make the other makes early Shabbos, it's Shabbos. The only point I want to mention is the logistics are a little daunting. I'll tell you why. What's the other going to do? He's home in the base other. So what's he going to do? He'll get ready for Shabbos. He'll say, I'm in mekabel Shabbos. Okay, mekabel Shabbos. Then, of course, he'll put on big day Shabbos and walk to shul to Mincha. Problem. If he's mekabel Shabbos, so he can't daven Mincha. He made Shabbos. So either he'll have to be mekabel Shabbos only regarding prishim and melacha, but not itzumei shel yoin, which I saw the Kajiglav in Simon Samach and Eretz Tzvi is matzdik the minig achsidim that daven Mincha Erev Shabbos way after Shkia. Where's Teisef Shabbos? If you mekabel Shabbos before Shkia, you can't daven Mincha of Chayil after Shkia. So he wrote a letter, a tshuva to the Imrei Emes, that the Chassidim would be medakdik to make Teisef Shabbos only prishim and melacha, but not itzumei shel yoin. So after you make prishim and melacha, you're allowed to daven Mincha, it's not Shabbos. It's just Shabbos regarding prishim and melacha. So maybe the Oval will do that, or probably a better alternative would be the Oval Punk this Friday will daven Mincha in the base Oval earlier. Then he'll decide when to make early Shabbos. He'll be mekabel Shabbos, be tumei shel yain. Then he puts on his big day Shabbos and walks to shul, and it's Shabbos for him. And then he'll daven Kabbalah Shabbos, etc., etc. But the truth is, I did see, which lays a chisi lahavin, Reb Shlomo Zalman in Shmir Shabbos Samachei Arucha Beis, he says that Reb Shlomo Zalman says the Oval should always be mekabel Shabbos before he goes to shul, so he goes to shul with his regular shoes. He doesn't mention anything about Mincha. I don't know, maybe he held it out Mincha Gedoyla. But one thing I will mention, there is a better limud chus on the minig, and that's based on the Aruch HaShulchan and Siman Tov, and Yardei Sifhei and the Pnei Baruch and Chav Gimel passing like this, that really it makes sense, like the Paiskim that hold that from Plaga Mincha onward on Friday, there's no Niyag Avelis, even before these Makabel Shabbos. So then, perhaps you could not be mekabel Shabbos necessarily. There's no the chiyuv of wearing big day avelis, so you can mekabel. So then you could just wear regular clothing and go to shul daven mincha. Maes shahaya, a true story, but let's see if you could discern the problem. But listen closely. Okay, I enjoy this. I'm sure you will also. Someone made a really early Shabbos. He davened mincha before the plag. A Kabbalah Shabbos married after the plag, ate a seudas, and he wasn't makbid to eat a kazayas at night. He had a young family. Bekitza, like he told me, it was 5 to 9, 25 minutes after Shkia, and the table was clean. The neiros Shabbos was burning brilliantly, and he felt really Shabbosdik. He wanted to go learn. You make early Shabbos, you could learn extra. Okay. He comes home, and then it hit him, he has a big problem. Because as I told you, 5 to 9, the table was clean, there was no challah. Challah was all consumed. Right? What was on his dining room table? Only burning neiros. Now he wanted to know, can he move his table, dining room table? Typically, when we light neiros, we put challah on the table. He was a new scenario. He had challah on the table when he made early Shabbos, but 5 to 9, bein hashmashos, it was only neiros and no challah. When does a table become muktzah als basis? Bein hashmashos, or when you make Shabbos? Could be when he made Shabbos, that's when it becomes a basis. So he made Shabbos, there were beautiful chals on the table. I'll tell you, it's going to have better shayla. Let's say a man is living alone and he lights neiros, and his minig is he davens mincha before, and he's mekabel Shabbos with adlok his neiros. He forgot to put chals on the table, but he got home before the end of bein hashmashos and he put the chal on the table. When does the din basis kick in? By bein hashmashos, or maybe adrabah? When I make Shabbos, it's even better than bein hashmashos. So the emes is, the pashtus is, the Gemara says, it's katzoi bein hashmashos. Who gave you right to say anything differently? And the Pri Megadim in Eish Lavar Meish Ayin Tes Yud Dalid has a third shayla. Listen to this. Let's say he lit neiros, didn't put the challah down, but before the end of bein hashmashos, the candles were blown out or went out. Is there a problem of buses? Because when it came bein hashmashos, there were no neiros. So he says the din of buses depends on bein hashmashos and nothing else, not Shabbos. Bein hashmashos. Evidently, bein hashmashos is the cutoff point because that's when Shabbos is for the whole world. You want to make early Shabbos? Gesundheit. My sifon loy brachas and wonderful. But bein hashmashos is totally when it's Shabbos for the ganze kado oretz. Oy bazoi, it makes sense in our case that if you do early Shabbos and you're not makbet to eat a kazayis balayla and you want to move the table, please put down Shabbos morning chalas before you go to learn. Now, the truth is, typically we don't move the table, so you have no problem. You're allowed to touch the table and use the table, have enough on the table. It's only moving the table. But if you want to move the table, for whatever reason it is, and Taka, I saw a number of poiskim, and the Shmir Shabbos says this in Chaf Reish Yud Aleph, that it's totally in bein hashmashos. Even if you made Shabbos Gomor an hour earlier, that doesn't help for the Gabi Dina bein hashmashos. It's totally in bein hashmashos. The Yisairis Tshuva in Chelik Aleph Kuftes on his own says it's totally when you make Shabbos. So therefore, it's not totally in bein hashmashos, but it's a plea. He doesn't mention the Pri Megadim. And Taka the Hagah, when they reprinted the Yisairis Tshuva, his Einikel wrote that his aide did not see a Pri Megadim that said the Befer is not like his psak. I also saw in the Mincha Shabbos Pei Tes Vav, he says, let's say a person tinded licht and didn't put chal on the table, l'shas maes. But as long as you put down challah during bein hashmashos, you salvage the situation. So we see the kula and the chumrah, it's bein hashmashos and nothing else. As far as when to start the Suda, so the emes of the Shulchan Aruch and Reish Ayin Aleph says it's always a mitzvah to start the Suda right away, to mekadesh Shabbos as early as possible. But for those that make early Shabbos, there's another reason to start the Suda right away. And that is based on a Hilchas Tefillah halach in Reish Lamed Hey Beis, that within a half hour before Zman Krishma Shal Ma'ariv, you can't start a Suda. Some people make early Shabbos, and it's beyond me why, but they sit in shmuz for an hour in shul, and they come home and they start making Kiddush. If it's a half hour before Zman Ma'ariv of Krishma, then you can't start the Suda. Now, the truth is now, the end of the summer, the Shkia is pretty early. It's almost an hour, more than an hour early at this time. So you got to be careful. Now, the Mishnah in both places, in Reish Samach Zayin Vav and Reish Lamed Hey, has a Chiddush Nifla that maybe b'shas adchak you're allowed to rely on the Krishma you said after Plag, then maybe you were yartzeit with that Krishma. But it's a Chiddush Gadol, because we don't go with that. But if it is negay and a person wants to make Kiddush and it's within a half hour before this man, a better eitz would be to make a shoyma, to remind him to say Krishma bizman. Now, a shoyma can't be someone who also has chayiv in Krishma. One's wife who's not chayiv in Krishma could be a good shoyma. Maes you listen to a fascinating shayla. Someone came home on a regular early Shabbos, it's 8 o'clock, Shkia is 8:35, he had plenty of time, but he's making Kiddush and he's great. He forgot to put the oven on. And he needs an oven, the food is cold. Can he ask his Yiddish neighbor who's still mowing his lawn to put on the oven? He's asking a Yid to melacha deraisa for him. So we would say, Ma'aduch, you can't ask a guy to do melacha for you, koshken a Yid. But that's wrong. In the end of Reish Samach Gimel, the mekabel says that if a person is mekabel Shabbos, he can ask a Yid to melacha, even a melacha deraisa. Ve'im toimar. How could it be a guy's asa and a Yid is mutter? Teretz says, no, it's not true. Before Shabbos, it's not Shabbos for most of a good part of Klal Yisrael. So therefore, for the ask a Yid or lahavdla goy is perfectly mutter. When is Amir la'akum asa? When it's Shabbos on the entire world. But now, it's mutter to ask a goy and even a Yid to melacha for you. In fact, if you learn Al's Neder, it's even more beautiful. I can't eat this piece of meat as it is a deraisa. I give it to my chaver to eat, there's no lefneiva. Same thing, Hilchas Shabbos. I could ask a Yid or a guy to put on the oven for me. And that's halacha psuka. But listen to a tricky question. Can I ask my Yiddish neighbor to close the oven? I don't need the oven on. It's going to burn a whole Shabbos, it's going to cost me a few dollars. It's not a hefsim ruba. But can I ask a Yid to do malach me and close the oven? So you're on the manish to open or close, it's still before Shabbos. So listen to an einfall. What's my heter to tell my neighbor, close the oven? Enechanami, it's no issa of Amira Yisrael, but for me it's an issa of Adaber Dava. I'm telling it to melacha for me on Shabbos. For me it's Shabbos, right? Adaber Dava. And Taka, the Hilchah Shabbos b'Shabbos, Chelik Avkum, Kuf Chav Dalet says, to ask you to do melacha for me, that's Tzoyrech Shabbos, there's no issa of Adaber Dava, is fine. But if it's not L'Tzoyrech Shabbos, it's also for me, Al Tzvedaber Dava. But I must tell you that if you look in the Levushei Srod, in Shulchan Aruch Shin Zayin Sif Yud Beis, and Rabbi Yashiv in the Chuvas Aleph and Dalet spells this out, says beferish that you're allowed to have Yid to do Malach of Yud, Mechabel is not Mechalik, even if it's not Tzoyrech Shabbos, like our oven case, closing the oven. V'yim Toimar, I have a Daber Dava, there's his Pashim. At 8 o'clock, when Shki is 8:35, or even when Shki is 8:05, but 8 o'clock is not a maes melacha. It's my personal issa, but it's not a maes melacha for that Yid. So if it's not for him a maes melacha, it's not for me a daber dava. That's the lumdis of the Levushei Srod. Now, Rabbi, I'm going to leave you with fear kashas. I had start for Pesach, but 4 hours lamaisa. I would love to have from the Olam all challenging early Shabbos questions. Okay, this is a true story. I had it my own ears heard the shayla. In our camp, this is the beginning of the summer when Shkia was 8:37, if I'm not mistaken. Mountains a little later. A bacha asked me, it was 8:20. We're in the middle of the Suda. Without my early middle of the Suda. He always puts on special Shabbos tzitzis, which he makes a bracha on, which we once spoke about, is fine. A new bracha because it's a new levisha. But he forgot to put on his Shabbos tzitzis Erev Shabbos. So he came to me, it was 8:20, it was 17 minutes before Shkia. Can he put it on now and make a bracha? So I looked at him like, what's the shayla? It's still Yom. Rabbi, it's still Yom. It's Shabbos, but it's still Yom. Tosfos in Pesachim Tzadik Tesma Beis says that you can't make early Pesach and eat the matzah early because Balayla is the mitzvah and it's not Laila. Here, it's early Shabbos, but it's not Laila. Why can you make a bracha on tzitzis at 8:20? It's still zman risa moisai. So that shouldn't be a problem. I'll tell you another shayla. Someone that always davens mincha gedayla, and he always puts on his Shabbos tzitzis after shkia. Any problem with that, l'chayra? What's the problem? It's still vadayoyim. It's still at least a risa moisai before shkia, and maybe close after shkia. It's still risa moisai. The same shas negay in Eretz Yisrael and those kehilos, like Karlin is one of them. They put on a talis gadol for Kabbalah Shabbos. Can a person, after he's mekabel Shabbos, put on a talis gadol and make a bracha on it? It's before Shkia. But Lamaisa, he made Shabbos. And soon we'll have a 4th Shaila, where it's Erev Yom Kippur. He's mekabel Tosefes Yom Kippurim, then he wants to put a bracha on his talis. So we would say, what's the problem? It's zman risa moisei. The Trumas Hadeshet in Chelik Beis, Kuf Chaf Aleph, has this very shayla. And he says that if you daven Ma'ariv already, you made it into Laila, we treat it like Laila. And he says two chedushim. Number 1, you can't make a bracha on a talis, gadol or katan. And number 2, he says, chas v'shalom, if this person, and he's talking about during the week, Rabbi said, if he davened early Ma'ariv on a Tuesday, and Khalil did not put on tefillin yet that day, cannot put on tefillin because it's already Laila. Now, me and you say, wow, but the Mechaba in Siman Yudches quotes this regarding tzitzis, and in Siman Lamed quotes regarding tefillin. Now, Lamaisa, the place can say, regarding tefillin, you can't be chayshish for this Trumas Hadeshen because you're not going to wear tefillin. But the Trumas Hadeshen has another tshuva in Aleph Reish Mem Ches, and he adds that if an Isha daven Ma'ariv, and then wanted to make a hefsek tara, it's too late, even though it's before Shkia. Because after Ma'ariv is considered Laila. The 4th halacha, this is an Even Ezer, Siman Kuf Chav Gimel Hey, if someone davened early Ma'ariv on a Tuesday and then wants to give a get, not today, because it's already night and you can't give a get at night. And the 5th chiddush was a real pella, someone davened early Ma'ariv on a Tuesday night, and then he found that he lost a karev. He can't start Avelis after early Ma'ariv because he made it Laila Legabe Ma'ariv. And that's in Shin Ayin Hey at the end. and Tav Beis Sif Yud Aleph. Now this is a big yesod, which I can't get into now, but it's the Trumas Hadeshan's Chodesh after Ma'ariv is considered Laila L'chumra. Based on this, Rabbi say, and I found this, I'm happy I found it in the Shraga Mer Chelik Vav Mem Aleph. He says if someone daven Ma'ariv on Shabbos and then realizes he didn't put on a Shabbos tzitzis, he could put on the Shabbos tzitzis because it's the hate, but he can't make a bracha because we could treat it like Laila. The other question that I asked you is a little different. Because there, he didn't daven Ma'ariv yet. What did he do? And the worst scenario, he was mekabel Shabbos. So this I found, again, only Heintiger, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, and Das Noit Hilchos Tzitzis Amud Shin Mem has 2 pages. He says, even though he didn't daven Ma'ariv, but Mistavra, he's mekabel Shabbos, he made it Lagabe Laila, and therefore should not make a bracha on the Shabbos Tzitzis. Which means on Yom Kippur Talis also he can't make a bracha. I found a base Baruch Ben Yamin Zilba in Yud Aleph Chaf Hey, who he's medayik from the Chayodam, no, that the Chumrah of the of the Trumas Hadeshan, which is a Chumrah Pliya, is only when you daven Ma'ariv. Ma'ariv makes it Laila, but not Kabbalas Shabbos or Kabbalas Yom Kippur. So Lamaisa, let's go to these back to what we started. If a person daven Ma'ariv, he can't put on a Talis Gadol or a Talis Katan with a bracha. The child that's most negeya, hope we won't be ever negeya, but when someone's late for Yom Kippur, which shouldn't happen, but if he's mekabel toisef Yom Kippurim at home, and he runs to shul, and he wants to put on a talis gadol, and it's still zman or isa moisai, before or after shkia, it's a safek bracha, so you can make a bracha. So let's not be late Yom Kippur, and let's be on time and make the bracha before. But let me tell you another challenging question, which I wish I could have a little more information. Someone made early Shabbos, and then occurred to him, I have a problem. Because I daven Ma'ariv, I made Kiddush, made a moitzi, all Friday afternoon. Do I count the Ma'ariv, Kiddush, till daven a moitzi, and if he benched before Laila, when do I count that into my Meya Brachas? Shabbos, the Gemara says, Menachas Mem Gimel is always at risk, you're always short. But now you made it early, where do you count those brachas? And the truth is, if someone benched with a kais and he benched before Laila, he lost 22 brachas. Ma'ariv has Shmones 7, 4 birchas Krishma, Me'en Shaloi, Me'en Sheva. Kiddush has 2 brachas, Tilzayim HaMoitzi has 2 more, benching has 4, and kais has 2 more. 22 brachas you lost from the cheshbon. And the emes is our minig Yisrael, the loy kalavush, that we count Meya Brachas, Erev ad Erev, not Boik ad Erev, Erev ad Erev. So it's not Erev. It's Shabbos, but not Erev. And I found Halicha Shleima Chav Beis Chav Gimel, B'Tzeila Chochma Dalet Kufnan Hey, and Rav Sternbuch and Dalet Siman Samach all say you can't count brachas that you said early Shabbos until it becomes Laila. So that means you have to make a lot of snacking, a lot of eating to make up the Meya Brachas, or listen to laning. The brachas are laning. I will say something that's not as good as it sounds, but maybe loita, the way the Trumas Hadeshan understood that after Ma'ariv is considered Laila, even Lagabi Tefillin, maybe we'll say Lagabi Meya Brachas. But what I found a little more reasonable, Rav Ozna in Chelik Simon Chav Gimel says, just like a person that benches way after the Zman Mitzvah Shabbos, but since it's Shabbos, you count the benching into the Meya Brachas, because if it's Shabbos, it's Shabbos. Now he doesn't go weiter, but I saw the Yabiyah Oy Mechele Yud Siman Zayin goes weiter. It says, Oy Bazoi, we see Meya Brachas is a Shabbos-related issue. If you start Shabbos early or end Shabbos late, anything in between is counted to the Shabbos. And the Shraga Mer Chelik Mem Gimel says this. And the Achrein Hichbid, a challenging question. Someone has yartzeit, Chaf Aleph Sivan, which comes out some years on Shabbos. He wants to make early Shabbos, because he always makes early Shabbos. It's good for the Shalom Bayis. Is there a problem because he's not davening on the yartzeit? The yartzeit is Chaf Aleph that begins by Tzeis. He makes early Shabbos, undoubtedly it's Shabbos. But what's the calendar date? Chaf. If someone makes early Shabbos with his 12 sons, and he was nifta after early Shabbos, but it's still young. When's the yartzeit? Friday, not Shabbos, right? And that's why the Chalkes Yakov and Yeridea Siman Reish Lamed Dalet struggles making early Shabbos, you're not davening on the yartzeit. He's not saying Kaddish on the yartzeit. So he says, maybe you'll say, based on a chiddush of the Taz, that when you make early Yom Tiv of L'Moshe Shmini Atzeres, it becomes Shmini Atzeres in Gansin L'chol Davar. But we don't pass in that way. But what I did see, the Shraga Amer Chelik Vav Kuf Mem Beis says a chiddush gadol based on a Helik Chasam Soifa in the Chuvas in Orchaim Kuf Samach Beis. The Chasam Soifa says when someone has a Suffolk yartzeit, he can keep it the day before because the schusim don't disappear. Fakert, you bring in schusim, the earlier the better. Chasam Soifa says regarding a Suffolk yartzeit, do it the day earlier, and it works for the next day. So Dr. Shraga Mer, it works also, here also. Really the yartzeit is chaf aleph, but daven chaf. That's a big chiddush, because the maes, the yartzeit is chaf. But I will say, which is something to think about, and someone likes the Amud, please listen closely. If someone has yartzeit on chaf sivan, so he davens chaf sivan, but the maisa, he's going to, when he wants to, he's not going to make, when he makes an early Shabbos, what's he going to do? Does he have the Chaf Sivan, the Friday Amid? For sure. But listen to this Cheverman. He has yartzeit on Shabbos. But he wants the Breitel early Shabbos. So he could have, in that case, he could tackle the yartzeit on Shabbos, he'll chop the Breitel earlier, right? But works both ways. But here the real chiddush is, when someone will make the early Shabbos, does he continue saying, does they say Kaddish on the next day? Because really, the yartzeit, of course, is the next day. So here it comes on a stickle of a tartar de sasri. It's chaf and chafal, but the emes is not true. It's not a tartar de sasri, it's the yartzeit, and we can talk to you all.
Shame irgendwie tell like a big Shekata Smith for today's shir. Was like to give big Shekata and of course I'll the Bismedish Colin Stolen for the being Sinus and Torah all these years and decades, and B'ez Hashem in the future. But Mustafa is the last year of Smith for now. Meanwhile, in this shul, this Bismedish, Ramadiyah, where it'll take place next week. The daily shir, meanwhile, the next few days should be here, and for changes will be Mediyah the Olam. Today's shittin was Moshe Klein, the Nishmas Over, Rabbi Sober, Moshe Menachem, Al Vashom, Yosef Vavelte, Shmos Tzur B'Tzar Chaim. To have the great schus sponsoring a shir called the Egan Shir Torah 718-851-8651, or email ist@yeshivanet.com. To be on the email list and receive updates about the shiurim and the locations of the shiurim, send the email to ist@yeshivanet.com and ask to be put on the email list. B'ez Hashem after Mincha, Rabbi Smith will say a sikim of today's share. Vanani Barakas Shem Rotzakash Baruch Lezakas and Shal Fig Hibel and Torah Mitzvahs. Shenema Al Nechofes and Matzitka Yagul Torah V'Yada.
Ali so, para